News Radio 840 WHAS. Good Sunday morning. Bob Sokoler, the Louisville Real Estate Show, with you until the top of the hour. Hope you're having a good Sunday. We got a lot of questions, a lot of stuff ready to go. And joining us for this show, we start with Chuck Crosby, the Crosby Law Offices. You can reach Chuck at 499-6360. Good to see you, Mr. Crosby.
Good morning, Mr. Sokoler.
Good morning. Also, Brad Lawler, owner of Home Team Inspection Service. They come in as a team. They do a great job. You can reach Brad and his team at 844-411-TEAM. Hello there, Brad.
Good morning, folks.
My son Greg is busy working again even this morning, so he won't be joining us on the air. But we have got a lot to go for, so let's rock and roll, shall we? Let's start with an inspection question, and there's so many that keep coming in. We're doing this as a COVID show. So what that means is, continuing, is we are on Zoom. We record them on Zoom, upload them to YouTube, and you can see it at any time, LouisvilleAnswers.com. If you want to see the show, LouisvilleAnswers.com. All right. Terry, he writes in and says he has a problem with his wife. Apparently, a bag of ice was starting to melt. His wife, Lucy, put the melting bag of ice in the upright freezer. They left the house for a week. They came back to find the ice apparently had opened the door with all the meat that was in there. Hundreds of dollars of meat spoiled because the door was open. Lucy swears the door was closed when she left, and the ice bag must have melted and opened the door. Terry is saying maybe not. Maybe Lucy forgot to close the door, and that's why the meat spoiled. So she's asking Home Team, does ice in a bag shift, and could it open an upright door of a freezer?
Wow. This is the first question I've had where I'm actually a marriage counselor,
yes,
or a referee. So, hey, so if we stick to the science of it, the first thing is we know that water expands when it freezes, right? It's one of the only elements that'll actually expand. So is it possible that the bag of water was put in close to the door and it expanded as it froze and pushed it open? Maybe. Or did the bag, as it was dropped in, and over time as it settled, as it froze, it rolled up against the door? Maybe. I'm gonna stop my answer right there because I'm afraid a call is going to come into my office.
Unless tomorrow. Chuck, do you have an opinion on this tomorrow by chance?
I have 4 freezers.
Yeah, and
I cannot imagine this happening because of a bag improperly placed.
Okay, so you're siding with Terry, the door may not have ever been closed.
Yes, somebody just didn't shut it right.
I got it. Okay, we move on. Chuck, here's a question for you. Anush writes in that he's selling his home. He received a contract on it, but the contract says that if the buyer fails to get a loan or if the home fails inspections, the buyer gets good faith money back. And he says that seems pretty unfair. And he says, why are the contracts written that way? How would you respond to that?
Because it's eminently fair. It's what you agreed to. That's why. A contract isn't something that you are forced into agreeing. So by definition, it's fair. You agreed to it. However, why do they do that? Because there's things that are beyond our control sometimes.
Anush, I would respond. The Board of Realtors in Louisville have hired attorneys to write the board contract. They're all the same. If you change anything in the contract, you raise a red flag. Am I correct? Not only will you raise a red flag, but as agents, we are instructed never to change the wording of those illustrious attorneys.
You're not supposed to.
Right.
You are required to fill in the blanks. That's what you're allowed to do.
That's it. So if Anush is not happy with the contract, what would you suggest for Anush to do?
Well, there's nothing to do once you've agreed to it. If when the next contract comes through, you don't want to do it that way, you can ask for a non-refundable deposit, and they can say no. I think this is pretty much standard everywhere, isn't it?
It is pretty much. Yeah, I'm licensed in Southern Indiana as well. Yeah, it's pretty much. There's different amount of teeth. But for the most part, the contracts favor the buyers. That's the way it is. And for any buyer who's going to go forward, you have the option of pulling out on inspections. but a little tighter now than it was at the beginning of the year, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, in the last couple of years, it's been such a seller's market that, you could have said, I would like a non-refundable deposit. And there were many deals that went through that way. But,
it is what it is. We move on. This one, Brad Lawler, comes from Barney. He sent us an email. He says it's not his real name. You'll see why it's not his name in a second. He says he wanted to enlarge his basement footprint for a family room. He removed a pole in the basement to expand his entertaining area. He did it without a problem. He says it's just perfectly fine. But he just read recently that it's illegal to move a pole without getting some sort of permit. Could he have a problem down the road?
Well, yeah, he certainly could. This is something he's going to want to talk to a structural engineer about. The problem that he's going to have over time is that the weight on the floor above could deflect the beam that it's sitting on, and it may be imperceptible, but it could have already moved. I mean, I'm sure that once he removed that pole, that column, that the weight did drop on that. Cause more deflection in that beam. So yeah, that could potentially be a problem. That could potentially create other structural issues around the house. He was going to know it. Probably first evidence is going to be as he starts getting cracking in drywall on probably the floors above it, is where he's going to note it. Eventually, he may end up noticing a bit of a dip in the floor, but chances are that the first evidence is going to be in the drywall.
Got it.
Cracks and tape coming open.
Yeah. Consult with an engineer. Legal wise on this, Chuck, anything you want to add to this for him not having pulled a permit?
Well, not pulling a permit for something that requires it can create a problem. Obviously, that's something that is going to come up when you try and sell the house. If you don't tell people about it and problems arise, well, you've got that liability. I'm just thinking pulling a pole out of the middle of the floor/roof can, if it causes damage, as in some kids sitting underneath of it, if it does go, well, that's a hefty lawsuit.
Gotcha. We move on. We now have 5 ways to help you sell your home and just about guaranteed to help you find your next one before you close. Go to bobsellmyhome.com or sellmyhomebob.com to read about it. You'll fill out a form. I'll call you. We'll talk. We move on. Tammy writes in, Chuck, this is for you and many others who may be living with a girlfriend, boyfriend, or whatever. Tammy writes in, she may have made a mistake when she invited her boyfriend, Tony, to move into her new home with her. Apparently not getting along now, both Tammy and Tony, and she wants to think about showing him the door. And he's claiming that he doesn't have to leave since he's changed his address legally to her location. I know you're not a divorce attorney there, Chuck, but in the letter of the law, does Tammy have the right to throw Tony out if she's not happy with him?
No. She's got herself a tenant. What she's done is she's given up possession. If you look at ownership of real estate, like having 10 sticks, allowing someone possession of your property is like giving them 9 of them. You can't just tell them to get out. It's a tenant. That's what she's got. Now, what her agreement is with him is probably not written down. So it'll be a little difficult to come up and say, well, you're supposed to pay me X, etc., unless they did have the foresight to write it down, but I doubt it. They never do. So she's got to give him some notice to get out, 30 days. And that's 30 days from, let's say it was today. It'd be 30 days, puts us into next month, and then to the end of the month before she could even begin that eviction.
So if he doesn't move,
if there's nothing saying that he can't stay, and that's if there's absolutely no agreements as to how long, etc.
Got it. So on the same path, but maybe a little different direction, if a boyfriend, girlfriend purchase a home together, your suggestion would be to have what in writing before moving forward and closing?
Well, that's not necessarily going to help them out. I mean, it's not like you can get a prenup. they aren't married. The laws related to dividing property relate to married people getting divorced. Boyfriend, girlfriend, there's no laws related to splitting up. It'd be the same as if you and I bought a piece of property together.
The suggestion is put it in writing, right? I mean, you want something in writing that has teeth.
Yeah. The problem lies in the fact, what are you going to put in writing? Yeah. Okay. This is a business. Not really. I mean, you can put something in there that if we break up, I'll move out. But, honestly, I don't know that that's going to have a whole lot of teeth.
Listen,
it's an inherently dangerous thing when people buy property together.
Buy or they cohabitate without some sort of agreement. I guess now, Tammy and Tony. Yeah,
it sounds like you're trying to equate this into a prenup. And keep in mind, Kentucky's, relatively speaking, fairly recent into the whole prenup game. Used to be they didn't have any weight in Kentucky since I've been licensed. Now that's changed. But I'm not familiar with a prenup, a pre-boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. It's inherently dangerous when you do that.
If you'd like to sign up for our newsletter, this week's topic, how to know when it's time to sell. We go over it in detail. You can sign up for the newsletter free of charge, no obligation. Go to welovelouisville.com. That's welovelouisville.com. We're going to take a break. When we come back, some of the 20 landscaping mistakes that make home buyers walk the other way. That and more of your emails, questions. Chuck Crosby, the Crosby Law Offices, will continue with us. 499-6360. Also, Brad Lawler, owner of Home Team Inspection Service, 844-411-TEAM. You can reach me, Bob Sokoler, anytime on my cell phone. Love to help you come out. We could set up an appointment to talk about the procedures for listing and selling your home, and then no obligation, free of charge if you want me to come out and talk. You can reach me at 376-5483. We're back in a moment on News Radio 840 WHAS. News Radio 840 WHAS, Bob Sokoler, Louisville Real Estate Show, here with you till the top of the hour. And with us, Chuck Crosby, Crosby Law Offices, 499-6360. Also, Brad Lawler, owner of Home Team Inspection Service, 844-411-TEAM. And you can reach me, Bob Sokoler, anytime on my cell phone, 376-5483, to help you guys get on the market, sold, or just to talk about what the process is. We thank Barbara Corcoran for all of her help, her friendship, and mentorship. Thank you, Barbara. If you're getting your home ready to sell, there are some mistakes you can make when you are putting it on the market in terms of landscaping, getting it ready out front. Some quick things to worry about. Large water features can turn off a number of buyers. They overwhelm the house. Invasive plants, they may look pretty, but they're definitely a turnoff for home garden savvy buyers, since the plants can quickly take over a yard. Large trees are beautiful, but too many of them in front of your house, not so good. A huge lawn can turn off a buyer because they're thinking, I gotta mow that entire lawn. So maybe landscape and put in some rock features and garden beds. A poorly made fire pit speaks for itself. Too many annuals, that just means more work for the buyer. Dog urine spots speaks for itself. Lawn chemicals, with more homeowners turning to organic ways to keep their landscaping lush and healthy. Chemicals such as herbicides, pesticides, fertilizers are a big no-no for some buyers if they see those lawn chemicals left out. Cracks in the concrete need to be looked at and addressed. Unconventional containers of a variety of things, get rid of them, put them away. Messy yard, high maintenance trees and shrubs, overspreading on landscaping, running into each other, also turnoffs for buyers. Pesky plants, a sloping yard, improper drainage, too much water on the property, showing potential water stains. Brad will tell you that's a problem. Also, poisonous plants, damaged landscape features, and lacking a color palette, or at least color at all, is another reason buyers walk the other way. All right. We move on now. Let's start with this email. Hi, Bob, and the rest of the group. I'm an agent in town, Chuck. Have an unusual problem. Another agent in town wrote an offer on this agent's listing. The agent did not include this agent who's writing in, let's call him Bill, as on the listing, and directed the actual offer to the seller. The agent, calling him Bill, says it's his belief that either the agent and or the seller are trying to work around Bill on commissions. What are options?
Yeah, it sounds like we're running into some problem, but definitely ethical violations. And if I were him, I'd make a phone call to a broker right quick.
Or have his broker reach out to this person's broker to review. Yeah. I haven't heard of that before, but it happens.
I've seen it a couple of times.
Oh, really?
It always gets ugly.
Wow.
Yeah, and the person trying to poach always gets in hot water.
Yeah, I don't know what the reasoning is, but okay. Birdie sent us an email. She wants her husband to change out the light fixture in the dining room, Brad. She says her husband is pretty handy, but a friend of theirs says that changing the light fixture should be done by an electrician to prevent a chance of fire. And the friend says it's illegal for the homeowner to change out a lighting fixture. I've never heard of that. Let's talk about it.
No. Yeah, I've never heard of homeowners are allowed to make repairs to their home. Replacement of a light fixture is pretty straightforward. Of course, the electricians out there would remind those homeowners that there's a risk of injury or death if they don't know what they're doing around the electricity. So, but if he's handy, he understands it. The light fixtures themselves can be tricky because they have to be supported. Many of them are heavy, and some of the lighter weight fixtures may not have even been secured to anything other than the junction box up above. But when you go to larger lighting, heavier lighting, the box may not be sufficient to hold it up. That's probably where they may run into some risk of damaging the fixture, hurting themselves, pulling the junction box out of the ceiling, which then is probably going to have the electrician come out. So, of course, if you're cutting off the power before you go in and make the electrical disconnects and reconnects, then you should be safe. But you probably ought to know a little bit of something before you start mucking about in the electrical junction boxes.
Bertie, it may be worth talking to an electrician to at least get some advice before you go forward. Sam has a problem, Chuck. His dad died, left him the house. His wife took the deed to an attorney, and apparently the house is now in both Sam and his wife's name. They're both on the deed. Sam is worried that if he ever got a divorce from his wife, she would get half of the house. And he's wondering, isn't inherited property always staying with the person who inherited it and not the spouse?
Ooh, we're asking a divorce question. Despite the wonderful Brandenburg formulas and how to determine what's marital and whether it's conjoined, that's all out there. The issue is, inherited property is technically non-marital with exceptions. If you inherit, $100 from dad and you put it in a joint bank account and you use that joint bank account for marital purposes and your wife's on that joint bank account, well, you just converted it. In my mind, you place a person on a deed, you just converted it. If my dad, like my dad would ever have anything for me to inherit, but if my children were to inherit, my dad, the itinerant preacher, if my kids were to inherit a piece of property from me and then they put their spouse on the deed, well, that changes the nature from non-marital to marital in most circumstances.
According to based the way I'm reading this, that Sam is saying that the wife took the deed to an attorney who put it in both of their names without Sam's permission.
Well, now that's not going to happen because you can't. I say you can't do it. Obviously, forgeries occur. Obviously, people will go and do that kind of stuff occasionally. Always get title insurance because that happens. But it's not. You can't just take a deed to a lawyer and add your name to the deed. That's not how that works.
Side note, I was watching one of the cable stations, and they're advertising the company that comes in, and for a fee, they make sure that the deed can't put in anybody else's name. When I read this question, I said, this reminds me of this commercial. We've talked about this once on the air before.
Yeah.
Do we need to investigate this at all, Chuck?
It's easily done. You just get on the computer and you get on the county clerk's website and look at the deed that's recorded. It will have to have both names. That's why it's kind of taking me aback a little bit. If I have a deed in my name alone, my wife just can't walk into an attorney's office and add her name. It would have to be a deed from me, actually be from me and her to me and her. So my signature would have to appear on that deed. Now, if somebody goes and they forge my name, well, that happens. But like I said, there's a paper trail a mile wide.
But this forgery thing is the concern, though. That's where this commercial is talking about. I'm not sure.
Yeah. It's like a Google alert. Whenever something's done at the county clerk's website, it sends you an alert.
Yeah.
It's not somebody just forged your name. It's saying, this document was just recorded that has your name on it. You absolutely have, in Jefferson County at least, and in many other counties, you can just get on the computer and look it up yourself right away. Plus, the county clerks, as a matter of fact, will offer that same product that they do themselves.
Okay. All right, we move on. It's an interesting. I think everyone's worried about, but it's the most important investment that we all own, and I'm worried that someone's going to take it out of my name, and that. Yeah,
but you know how many times I've seen that in 30 years?
Yeah, my luck, it would be one more time.
Maybe three or four times.
All right.
3 or 4 times. It's not to say it's not happening.
Yeah.
Just with residential property, it's inherently more difficult than, say, on a commercial property.
Got it. Tim is writing in that he's looking at new homes to buy with his wife, Lori. And he says, as he went through the homes, they see that the electrical box there, some of the wires, here's that question we were talking about on this, Brad, have red coating of some sort on it, and others don't. I had sent this to Brad earlier in the week because this is kind of unusual. He's curious, what do the red letters on wiring mean?
Okay, so in that particular case, it was marked with red ink that said operator. I checked the National Electrical Code's handbook, and there is no designation for operator on any of the wire guides. So my hunch is that at some point in the construction of that home, renovation of the home, that just happened to be a spool of wire that the electrician had with him, and it went in there. It might have been marked for another purpose, for another project. Electricians oftentimes will use leftover product when they go into a house or into a building to wire it. So while there's a color coding standard that's used, like a white sheathing is for a 15 amp circuit. It's a 14 gauge wire. Yellow sheathing, when you see it in the house, it's a 12 gauge wire. It's for a 20 amp circuit. But more often than not, the electricians go by the actual gauge of the wire, not the coating on the outside of it. But the markings on wire will tell you whether you can do certain things with it, like bury it underground. So the markings are important to understand, but in that particular case, I don't know what the word operator meant. So if there's an electrician out there that has seen that, call in and let us know, because I couldn't find any record of that particular type. It's not in the code books. It could be just a manufacturer's item or a project type item that was created.
Yeah, we had gotten a picture of it. So let me just follow up. For buyers who are walking through homes who may be concerned about a home built in the 50s, 60s, or 70s that may or may not have aluminum wiring, is there a tip-off in what the sheathing looks like so the buyer knows ahead of time?
Okay, yes and no. So the thing you got to be careful about is if you happen to look into a receptacle, you can see it in an outlet, or you can see it in an electrical panel. I do not advise you take off the dead front on the electrical panel though to see it. But what you're looking for is, rather than seeing copper tip on it, you're going to see a silver colored tip. The problem is that there is a type of wire called a tinned copper, and what they do is they put a solder coating on the end of the copper, so it looks like single strand aluminum wiring, but it's not. It's actually copper, but you don't know it unless you scrape off some of that tin. So the single strand is relatively simple to see. I mean, we're looking for, when we pull the dead front off where you can see the wire exposed, we're looking for those tips, and we can see that it's the strand aluminum, because there's going to be some oxidation on it. It's a little bit dull in color versus the tinned copper, which tends to be a little bit shinier. But the cloth type of wire covering is one of the tip offs that you might be looking for too. But yeah, you got to be careful. We have a lot of home inspectors that call out tinned copper and say that it's single strand aluminum. Advise the electrician come in. The electrician comes in and says, no, this is tinned copper. You're okay. So it is something that's a little bit gray, particularly if you're not an experienced inspector, but the electricians are going to know for sure. And anytime an inspector finds single strand aluminum wiring, we're advising that they talk to an electrician anyway, because they'll want to make sure that outlets and wire nuts are tight and secure. They're not causing the little bit of arcing, which is where the heat builds up and the fires start.
Got it. All right. We thank our folks with us today. Chuck Crosby, the Crosby Law Offices, 499-6360. Also, Brad Lawler, owner of Home Team Inspection Service. And you can reach Brad and his team at 844-411-TEAM. If you're thinking about selling your home, we have a free no-obligation booklet. It has hundreds of useful tips. If you want a copy, free again, no obligation, send me an email, bob@wesellouisville.com. Put selling tips in the subject line, and I'll send that out to you. You can also reach me anytime on my cell phone, 376-5483. Guys, thanks for joining. Thanks for everybody being here. We'll see you next Sunday on News Radio 840 WHAS.